everyone, and welcome to the Replay Booth podcast. My name is Ella.
I'm Catalina.
My name is Keiri.
I'm Asa.
And I'm Gus.
And today we are covering week four's topic of sports and media producers, practitioners, and stakeholders. And our guest for the podcast this week is going to be Caroline Chrysler. She is a 2022 graduate at the University of Mississippi and currently works at ESPN in Bristol, Connecticut as a live event associate producer. And we are so excited to get to know her and her experience in the sports news media world. Okay, so I'm about to add her. She,
Hello. Hi, Caroline. Before we start today, I just wanted to say thank you for taking time out of your schedule to have a conversation with us. And Ella, do you want to start us off?
sure. So I just want to ask if you can explain your journey to where you are now, like experience in college, maybe before then, and kind of what has helped you get to where you are today.
Yeah, so I started when I was 16, 17, I can't remember, doing stuff for a minor league baseball team in Columbia, South Carolina, and worked for them throughout high school. And then in college, my sophomore year, I applied to work at the SEC network. I went to Ole Miss. I applied to worked there producing or graphics producing games. It was all games. It was men's, women's basketball, volleyball, soccer, baseball, softball, football. So I did all of those. And then after college, after graduation, I worked as a graduate assistant at Ole Miss until I ended up getting my job now with ESPN.
Do you have a favorite sport to cover or one that you find more challenging to produce and why?
I think I have two main sports that I do. I do college football, college baseball. And I would say that they're equally challenging because football is right now, you have the tempo and it's just go, 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 and there's constantly something happening. And so you're working at a much quicker pace. But in baseball, it can be very slow. The game can be 2.5 hours, it could be 4.5 hours. And you've got to be there the whole time covering what's going on. So they present unique challenges.
Yeah.
What would you say has been your biggest learning experience during live production, and how has it shaped the way that you work?
Yeah. I'm sure y'all have probably watched a game before and you've seen a mistake graphically, because that's what I do, a misspelling, a wrong headshot. And I've done it before. I've been the butt of a lot of jokes where something went wrong like that. And, you want to get down on yourself and be like, I can't believe I just did that. Like I knew better. And you can't. You got to keep moving and you got to keep going. And you'll be spoken to after the game, but for the rest of that game, you've just got to keep your head down and keep going and learn how to work through those.
How were you able to create connections throughout your time in college to set yourself up for success post-graduation?
Yeah. Honestly, I think it really started with working in high school. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I gained a lot of experience with one particular software that they use in the school control rooms. And that got my foot in the door to begin at SEC Network with Ole Miss. And then I now am on the other side of this, but when I was a student, ESPN would send down for certain bigger games, a producer, an associate producer, associate director, and a director. And keeping in contact with those people, like any chance I could with people that came down to speak with us, going to certain events. Work in college was always voluntary. We were never made to work. If my boss was always like, if you don't want to work, I'm not gonna make you work. But I very rarely, from sophomore year to when I left after my grad assistantship, missed a game because I knew the importance of putting in the grunt work then to make it worth it later on.
So you mentioned how like we might have seen a graphic that had like a slight little mistake in it and everything. So how would you handle feedback from a slip up if you ever created one?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's you have to own it, especially with me and the position that I'm in. I have two separate operators. I have an operator with our score bug, and then I have an operator with the full screens and the lower thirds and anything else that comes up. And a lot of times they're the last line of defense almost of like they're the last one whose eyes get on it. So they get down on themselves and I you can't let them do that. You got to just take responsibility for it. I should have been there. I'm helping them out. Like it's my fault. I'll do better next time. You got to take it, be like, know where the mistake was and be more diligent about checking over that area the next time and
So
not dwelling on it. Sorry.
you're good. What does a typical workday look like for you? Like, does the time of the year, like you said, you have two main sports, does that contribute to a different change in your schedule, kind of time commitment, stuff like that?
Yeah, so typical day is very different depending on what sport I'm doing. Football, I pretty much stay in Bristol the whole season and do our games from Bristol. Baseball, I travel. So last year, I mean, I did a lot of SEC, but it was pretty much every single week I was on the road. I was in Tuscaloosa twice, Oxford, Mississippi, Starkville, Mississippi, Auburn, all over the place. So that really changes what you're doing, how your week looks, and you have multiple games. So I start the week just looking into the teams, seeing what's going on. Um, Football is a lot easier. We have one set crew that we work with for the whole season, and you kind of start the week. I start my week on Tuesdays usually, because I would work Saturdays and then take um, Monday and or Sunday, Monday off, begin Tuesday. And we go straight through just kind of researching, working. We have team meetings with talent. And if we're traveling, I traveled twice for football. I was actually ACC for football, which was fun. So I got to go to Durham and Raleigh. So pretty much same place. But yeah, we work with talent and then they kind of tell us what we want. We have time to build our graphics before the game starts. And then we show up 6 hours prior to kick, or 6 hours prior to first pitch, whatever it may be. There we work through kinks, we rehearse our opens. There's only so much you can rehearse because anything can happen in the game and you just kind of have to be prepared for it all. And then we go through the game and wrap it up after it ends. Go home.
So you said you've been in this since you were about 17, 18. So how has live production evolved since then? And then how do you think it's going to change over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, it's weird. It hasn't really changed too terribly much because I came into it and we had all the apps. We had ESPN Plus. Now there's been expansions of that since where because a lot of people are cutting the cord with cable and so really pushing people to our apps and pushing people to our streaming services. I think that's going to continue to be pushed. I think there's going to be with realignments, there's going to be changes. Already the Longhorn Network, when Texas joined the SEC, that went down, and the office in Austin that ESPN had was basically we took some of them up in Bristol, and then Charlotte took a majority of other people, and so I see a lot of changes with that. We're definitely talking about the streaming services now. A lot of Big 12 games and everything will be on there rather than on cable networks.
So you said that you travel a lot for baseball. Do you enjoy being on the road and does it affect at all how you approach production?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy the balance of it. I like having my time where I'm in Bristol and I can just go home after the games, but being somebody that came up through a school control room, I love to give back to them and I am I'm a really big advocate for them. They're relatively new, so it does kind of change because you're going in and working with students or very young freelancers that are trying to get their foot in the door. So you go into more of like teaching mode than I would in during like a football game when I'm here, when everybody is kind of on level playing field. You're trying to build these people up in the school control rooms. And it's also kind of refreshing. Like you can get so jaded, um, like being here on campus. Like everybody's been working here forever, and you get a little disillusioned, and then you go and you meet somebody that wants to be where you are. And then I remember being in their shoes too, and it kind of brings that spark back a little bit. So I do enjoy the road.
What would you say is like your overall favorite aspect of your job that you have?
Definitely making connections with the students in the rooms and then seeing them later on having like emailing me being like, "Hey, I'm coming up for this internship," or "Hey, I got the job, like I'm going to be working here," and then seeing them down the road and seeing their successes. I've loved that. That's happened multiple times, and it's great.
So we've talked about travel a bit, and you mentioned Durham and Raleigh. And I don't know if you
Mhm.
see the North Carolina flag up there,
Yeah.
but I'm from Durham, and
Okay.
from where the places you traveled, what is your favorite place that you've been?
Oh gosh, that's tough. Um, okay. Y'all are gonna So I went to Ole Miss. So obviously I got to do the state Ole Miss baseball series this past year, which is obviously like massive rivalry. And that was great going back. But I want to say my favorite memories and my favorite time where I grew the most was LSU. It was Baton Rouge, which feels really wrong to say, but it really was great. It was one of the first times where I was really pushed, and we did 7 softball games in 3 days and had like 45-minute turnarounds in between games, and also with students trying to help the students and everything. And so I grew a lot. We all grew a lot. It was a great learning experience. It was my first year with the company, and so that was a lot of fun.
So you talked a little bit about working with the crew. How is that dynamic, like maybe on campus or during football season versus when you're on the road? And then like how do you collaborate and kind of communicate with each other that way?
Yeah, so during football season, it's same talent, same. So I had Tom Luganville, Dana Boyle, West Durham all season long as my talent. So I got to know them really well and got to form a relationship with them where, there was a lot of like middleman communication that was cut out. They wouldn't go to the producer if they wanted something, they'd come straight to me, which made my life so much easier because it just streamlined everything. And then obviously we all learned the lingo on how people say things in the control room, and communication is a lot more efficient during that time. And during baseball, you kind of switch off week to week. You could be working with one producer this week, one director the next, but it's still there's an overall like kind of language and kind of rhythm you all get in. But you just have to stay on your toes and communication before the game starts, so hey, when you say this, what do you mean? Because you have to say a lot with very few words in the control room during the game.
So you just said you work with like a lot of different people, a lot of different producers, but how do you in particular prepare for a live event? Do you have any specific steps that you take every single time to ensure or almost be positive that everything is going to run smoothly?
Yeah, I mean, I go to the same, depending on the sport. I start the week off just intensely looking at that team because the teams change every single week. It just depends on what show you're on. And so I go in and I look at what podcasts are their home broadcast people doing because they're going to know the teams best. I try to learn the best I can about that specific team for the first day or so and take my notes, do all of that. We have paperwork and spreadsheets that we have to get done that link to certain graphics. And so I go through and triple check and make sure. I actually had a binder that had like checklists for football this year that had spelling, abbreviations, all sorts of stuff in there that I would go through and double and triple check. And then, we get in for football. This was one thing we had to make sure of too, and it was just routine every week. And we would go through our lower thirds with their bios or their stats and make sure headshots are pulling. Are their names correctly? Is their hometown pulling right? Like little things like that are you don't really notice if they're right, but are glaringly wrong if there's something off about it.
So, after those live events, what does post production look like for you? And do you have anything in particular that you like or don't like about it?
Yes, so it's basically a lot of at first it's kind of community based. I go in and I take all of the specific graphics for each team and we put them in like a drop folder so that they can be reused by people that may have that team next week or the following game, whatever it may be. We go and do all that, try to take the weight off of people as the season goes on. And then I typically go and it's a lot of self-reflection. It's let me watch the game back and kind of see where now that I'm hindsight's 2020, what could I have pushed for in one area? What could I have maybe, you know, reeled back on a little bit? Where did I miss and where can I improve? And then it's on to the next. I mean, you don't really spend too much time sitting there and beating yourself up. You see what you did. All right, I can be better here. All right, I didn't do as well there. All right, got to just move on and take it to the next teams.
What would you say are kind of like your ultimate goals and like aspirations with this career as you've been in it for a couple of years now?
Yeah, I'd like to be a producer in, well, there's two ways I'm gonna go. It's either become a producer here, in Bristol and stay with the company through that, because it really is a great company to work for. I couldn't say a bad word about it. But the other is I really do love the school control rooms and the kids and doing stuff for them. I say kids, they're like 2 years younger than me. But working with them is great. And there's so many college campuses that are building control rooms. And the person who ran ours, my boss in college, I called him my Mississippi dad. He like took me on holidays when I couldn't go home because I was working. And if I could be that for somebody else and then also just help them grow in this field, I would love that. So either producer or do that.
And you just mentioned your career goals and everything. If you could go back to when you were our age, would you change anything along your path?
I'm not. I mean, honestly, if anything, I probably would have worked a little less, and just enjoyed being a college kid a little. Like I went to two baseball games all of college, and it was because I was working them all. Now, do I regret it? No, I skipped a couple steps here because of all of that, the connections and the networking and work that I did, which is great, but also like you gotta have that balance.
Okay, so this can be like the last question, but I was just gonna ask, was there a moment in your life that you kind of, I see your sports posters behind you. Was
Yeah.
there a moment in your life where you were like, I want to do sports media or kind of I want to be involved in sports in some way? And then kind of your relationship with sports growing up, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a house where every Saturday my mom went to Carolina games and my dad sat us down on the couch and we grew up Georgia fans. So we sat down and watched Georgia. He was always like, look, you may be in Columbia, but your mom's gone. We're not watching that. Um, so I mean, from the start, and then every single Braves game, we were watching it. When I moved off to college, me and my dad would set up the phone and time our broadcast to line up so we could watch the baseball game together from 8 hours away. And I kind of always knew that I wanted to do something in sports. I didn't know what that was. And then I'm a little bit of a research nerd. I like the stats. I like knowing what's going on a little bit at a deeper level. And I fell into graphics because of that and looked at numbers and stats and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of stumbled into it in high school. I needed a job. I needed, gas money, and working at the baseball team sounded fun, and it just kind of snowballed from there. But I think I always knew that I wanted to do something in sports.
So, Caroline, thank you again for your time, sharing all of your experiences and all your advice. And we all hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thank you. Y'all too. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Again, as a group, we want to thank Caroline for taking time out of her busy schedule to talk to us about her position and her experiences in the sports media world. In terms of this class and especially week four's content, I think our conversation was really valuable. Like this week, we were supposed to cover ideas of sports, media producers, practitioners, and stakeholders. And I think our interview perfectly encapsulated many of those themes. So, like in class this week, we discussed the idea of separating yourself from the herd, which is identifying a specific interest area in sports journalism and becoming highly knowledgeable in that area. So it was really refreshing for me, at least, to hear a story like Caroline's because it shows that someone who's only 3 or 4 years older than us can accomplish something as challenging as paving their way in a competitive career field like sports news media. And I just think it was so cool. Caroline knew that she wanted a career in sports, but she didn't know exactly where she would end up or where she wanted to be. And I think it was kind of funny when she said she fell into the broadcast room and just found a love for it and ran with it. I enjoyed hearing about her time in high school at the ballpark and her time at the SEC network out at Ole Miss, and finally like the ESPN experiences. It was just impressed to hear how she networked and paved that way for her job today. And it's evident that like using the tactic of specialization or separating yourself from the herd helped her do that. So I just was wondering like what were y'all's like significant takeaways from that?
So, for me, one of the biggest takeaways from our interview was the importance of communication and not just with the audience, but with peers and producers, because Caroline said that she worked with different producers during every single event that she went to. And like we learned in class, modern day sports journalists do not have a single job or responsibility, but they're very versatile across all the platforms. And Caroline highlighted that while she does graphics, one of her main tasks is to research the team prior to the actual game. So she needs to know her names, their nicknames, what they're known for. And personally, our conversation with Caroline made me realize that she has had to work hard with all of her connections in order to get where she is today. Whether it's from Ole Miss or even after Ole Miss, Caroline has been working to get all of her connections. And it was really nice to hear that she is only a couple years older than us and she, at our age, did not know what she wanted to do. So it's kind of nice to hear that she's so successful now and she didn't really know what she wanted to go into. And I really also liked her connecting to when she was younger and always having sports on the TV. So, and I think we can all relate to that. So I think she was very personable. And all in all, it was just very inspiring and it was a really nice conversation to have and to see how much she's accomplished, but especially how humble she is about all of her journey too. So,
Yeah, I definitely agree. Our interview really gave me a unique perspective on how visual elements shape the way that we consume and understand sports news and just sports in general. And in our class, we discussed how modern sports journalism isn't just about words, but it's also about multimedia presentation. And she really reinforced that by explaining how she can break down complex statistics and provide context for the viewer. And this connects to our class discussion on how the digital age has changed in the sports world and how reporting is more visual and interactive rather than just simply relying on traditional game recap or written analysis. And another key point was the balance between speed and accuracy. She brought up how, sometimes people can have name slip ups and just little errors that sometimes can go viral, but um, you know, last minute changes. She emphasizes how critical it is to get every detail right. And this ties into what we've learned about with the ethics of sports journalism. And it's a reminder that in today's media landscape, every element of sports coverage carries weight and helps to shape our perception. And overall, it really just gave me a new appreciation for the behind the scenes work. I think a lot of times viewers just tend to see what goes on the court or on the field, and they just call it a day at that. But being able to see that there's multiple components going into the overall viewing experience, that was really cool to see. And just be able to talk to someone who is so close and hands on with a network that we all depend on to consume sports.
Yeah, and like you just said, with the every little detail being right, and how everything, like all the behind the scenes work and everything. I personally work with like Clemson student event operations. So for one men's soccer game, I was working the scoreboard at Riggs, and I was sitting right beside the statisticians and all the graphic designers. And it just made me get a completely new respect for them because they were standing there like on the desk with their binoculars saying 22 with the corner kick and everything. So I used to not realize the amount of work that used to be put into everything. And that's what I learned with Caroline as well, along with the amount of travel and time she puts into her job. I used to think that the designers creating the graphics used to be like at the headquarters back in Bristol, like she was talking about, and just in communication with the photographers at the game, not actually in the booth. Because I definitely grew, and now I know that obviously, but that hearing Caroline talk about it really like opened my eyes to everything. And I really have a new appreciation to how fast they turn out everything, all the content, making sure everything's accurate, like that slip up that you talked about if a name happened to be wrong. With Caroline talking to us and sharing her experiences, it made me realize just how important and time consuming graphic designing can be. Because I tried to download like Adobe and I couldn't even make like a Nike swoosh. Like it was rough. So even for professional, the amount of time that she has to put into everything really made me appreciate it even more. She talked about traveling to all of her other different locations that her career path has taken her, and how she puts in that extra effort just to stand out and everything.
Yeah, kind of to piggyback off that, like with traveling and everything, like me myself, like I'm an athlete, so we're traveling all the time during the season. And some of those people, like Caroline, come with us and do the behind the scenes stuff. And I didn't really realize how hard of a job it really is for them. Like I took it for granted, kind of just watching it on TV and all that stuff that she does. You really take it for granted because it's such hard work and they're just so dedicated to their job. And for me, like my dream job ultimately is kind of to work for ESPN. And it was really cool to hear from someone that's kind of in that world right now and to see that she really enjoys it too. But one of like my biggest takeaways from the interview with Caroline is that she was really kind of able to give us like an idea and like kind of a framework of how to first off like follow your passion and understand the risks that you have to take to get where you want to be. And then also the fact that when she like started back in high school, like she just did it just like for some change in her pocket. She didn't really think that it was like something that she wanted to do. But she saw like over time she was able to really enjoy it. And I feel like it's a pretty good lesson for all of us. Like we don't want to get so fixated on one thing that we want to do in our careers, and we kind of want to keep an open mind for some things that might cross your path and you really enjoy, and you kind of just take off from there. And it was really refreshing to see her kind of do that and kind of fall in love with it at a young age and go to college for it and just kind of pursue that dream. And it's really cool to see where she's at now. And I just really appreciate her coming on the podcast. And it was just a great conversation to have with her. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like being her sister too. It's been really cool to see her journey go, but it was also like I know her and like even when she was talking about helping people like get forward and help furthering the career and kind of helping people out, I thought that was really cool too because I feel like a lot of times people are kind of when they get to a position they kind of shut off and they don't want to help others. But if that's all y'all have, I think that does it for this episode.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's all I got. That's awesome.
Perfect.